This is CNN.
Next week, the U.S. Supreme Court will hear arguments in two landmark cases on same-sex marriage. At issue, the Defense of Marriage Act, or DOMA, and California's Proposition 8. Let's start with DOMA. DOMA is the federal law that defines marriage as a legal union between a man and a woman. It keeps gay couples from getting the same benefits as couples of the opposite sex, even in states where same-sex marriage is legal. President Clinton signed DOMA into law back in 1996. He now says it should be struck down. Let's bring in our legal guys. Avery Friedman is civil rights attorney and law professor in Cleveland. Good to see you.
Hi, Frederica.
And Richard Herman, a New York criminal defense attorney and law professor, joining us from Las Vegas. Good to see you as well.
Hi, Fred.
All right. And so, Richard, how will this be argued when you talk about, federal legislation that may in some cases state something very differently than what state law articulates?
Right. And that's the problem, Fred. The states that allow same-sex marriage are not bound by the federal laws, and that's why you have this dilemma going before the Supreme Court. And the issue before the Supreme Court is, does DOMA discriminate against gays and lesbians? And that is the issue the court will address. Avery said there's a huge procedural issue here, and the court just could hang their hat on that and not address DOMA. But I think we know this is a very active court, the Roberts Court. I think they're going to find a way to hear this case. I think they're going to come down and they're going to invalidate the Defense of Marriage Act. And if you think that the health care laws are complicated now, when this gets invalidated, not only health care, veteran benefits, estate tax laws, through the up, down, and around, so many laws are going to be affected by this. I think 1,000 provisions of the laws will be affected when this comes down. It's landmark legislation, and it'll be a landmark decision by this court.
Let's move on to Prop 8 now. Proposition 8 was passed by California voters in 2008. It amended the state constitution and took away marriage rights of same-sex couples. But now, two same-sex couples are challenging that. Richard, how will this be argued, that marriage of same-sex couples in a state that legalized it should be protected regardless of what the voters said?
Yeah, is it equal protection? Can states ban the ability for gays and lesbians to marry? That's really the issue. The state of California has voted on it. They've said marriage will be defined as a man and a woman, and that's how we see it in California. On appeal, it was reversed. The Supreme Court again has a procedural issue that they have to overcome. Will they overcome it? I believe they will. I believe, again, this will be another landmark decision by the Roberts Court. And what will happen here? One, they could uphold this Proposition 8, and therefore the law would stay in place in California. They could invalidate it and ban it, and therefore that would have nationwide impact on every state, which would now be required to recognize marriage by men and women. Or they could fall into that 8-state, 9-state compromise, which says if you provide rights to same-sex spouses, the same rights that you would provide to married spouses, you must allow them to marry. But it would not affect states' abilities to ban and hold up a Proposition 8 type.
Avery, we could hear you agreeing on some points and then not agreeing on a lot of others.
Yeah,
he
agrees on all of them.
This is a very, very, very narrow case, and that is if Prop 8 is reaffirmed by the Supreme Court, in other words, reversing the dismissal of it or the invalidation of it, that will only affect California. Here's my prediction. In Prop 8, they will never get there. This case will be thrown on procedural grounds, meaning who has the right to bring? Standing. There's no standing here, and that means the Federal Court of Appeals invalidation of Prop 8 will remain. That's what I think we're going to see here.
Oh, my.
Yeah. Avery, David Boyce is arguing this case. He is one of the most brilliant attorneys in our country. I think the Supreme Court is going to address this issue. They're not going to hold their hat
Ted Olson
on a
and David
procedural.
Boyce,
They're going to address it.
They were Gore versus Bush. They're on the same side here. These are the powerhouses in the profession. What a great, exciting argument coming up this week. Both cases.
All right, we will all be at the edge of our seats waiting that. Thanks so much, Avery Richard. We'll see you again in about 20 minutes or so. We're going to talk about the Jodi Arias trial and what it's costing taxpayers and what it may be costing prosecutors and the defense as well.